Okay, Dean, it's 10:31 here in Jerusalem. I think it's a great time to start. Thank you,
It's a
everyone,
great time
for
to start
logging
too.
in. Okay, great. My name is Mark Rosenberg. I'm here with my colleague, Adina Bennett, and my silent support colleague who's running all of our online programming, Josh Sussman, here to share we just realized is over 40 years combined experience helping North American Jews move to Israel. I am currently... I guess my job title is I'm the VP of Diaspora Partnerships, and I'm excited to share this special webinar on your first steps to Aliyah. Just a few pieces of information. We'll be addressing all questions, please, in the Q&A. In the chat, my colleague Josh will be sharing some of the links that we'll be talking about. So please try and push your questions to the Q&A. That's where we will have our eyes to answer. A frequently asked question that will come up. We will be sharing a recording of this to all of the participants here today, as well as a copy of the links that do come through. So please feel free to multitask, or if something does pull you away, you do not have to ask if we're recording this. We are recording this, and you will receive one probably in about 48 hours after it gets rendered or processed or whatever the Zoom thing happens when it pulls it out of the machine. I digress. Let's get into this information because we have about, like, as I said, about 55 minutes to really go over, I think, a wealth of information that's going to help you prepare for your Aliyah. A little bit about me. I grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Shout out for people from New Jersey. I went to university where I got my BA and master's in education, and I was a 7th grade English teacher. I made Aliyah just about 19 years ago, just about a week and a half ago. But I made it without Nefesh B'Nefesh, and it's going to be a little bit of our story. Adina also has some experiences herself coming before I guess the system became much more organized and processed with the help of Nefesh B'Nefesh. I guess really trained as an educator and still do a little dabbling in teaching for almost 2 decades now. Wow, it's weird to say that, 2 decades, but 11 plus years assisting thousands of Olim. So I always like to challenge you if you have some particular questions where there's pretty much we've seen most of it. So if you do have a question, feel free to know that we probably have your answer, and we're going to try and address it today. But there will also be a special forum in about, I think it's about 10 days. You'll get information about it, which is going to be a huge Q&A with our experts. You'll get a personal invitation to join that special webinar where it's just going to be an open forum to address your Aliyah questions. The first steps to Aliyah, some of the things that we're going to talk about today is how to get started. We're going to talk about the process. We're going to talk about the rights and benefits, the application, healthcare, communities and schools, and just some tips to building your life in Israel. These are the major topics that we're going to cover. So if you do think that there are something that's not yet covered yet, there's pretty much sure we're going to cover it. We might get it to the end, and if you have something specific, you'll be able to ask it. Fantastic. Let's get into it. There are 2 major things to talk about whenever we talk about Aliyah, which is the planning and the processing. The planning is answering questions: where you're going to live, and how are you going to feed yourself, and what are you going to do on a normal Sunday afternoon or Tuesday morning. Just planning out the logistics of where you're going to go. The processing deals with the application. Okay, there's a lot of details that come into it. So which one is more important is a question that comes up, and they both are. Some people, for some reason, say, you know what, I'm going to wait till I find a job and then I'm going to start the application. Okay, which is weird because someone might offer you a job and then it's going to take you a few months to get the application together. Some people fill out all the application and they're like, okay, now that I'm going to wait till I get approved and then I'm going to figure out where I'm going to live and what I'm going to do and if there's any tax implications are coming. And I'm like, what? You know, they are both important. And I'll emphasize that if you are thinking about coming, your earliest is coming in the next 8 to 10 months. You should start the Aliyah application. There's no commitment to doing so, but the planning is something that you need to start putting the pieces in place, and that's what I really want to emphasize first. Just it's important to emphasize your status will be important. If you have already made Aliyah, okay, if you already have a Tudat Zahut, whether your parents brought you to Israel, you need to understand the actual technical status of it. But if you already did make Aliyah, then you need to engage with the Beit Israeli. It's a special office that deals with returning Israelis. But if your parents made Aliyah and you left before the age of 14, or your parents moved to the U.S. or Canada and you were born there, even though you have an Israeli passport, you might be entitled to benefits. Or if you don't have an Israeli Israeli passport, you probably need one, even though it doesn't mean you've made Aliyah. And that's just a problem that's one of the many problems that have popped up with the COVID situation, is that currently it is that only if you have an Israeli passport can you enter the country. And all of a sudden, all these people who were shy about getting their children Israeli passports suddenly are eager to get it because they'll be able to travel in and out of Israel. Again, we'll be happy to answer some of those technical questions when we get to that portion of the program. Okay. I want to emphasize as much as I can the keys to your planning. The planning is really, really important. You might be able to know where all your documents are, which I'm going to go over one by one in about 15 minutes time, 10, 15 minutes. But if you have not planned out your Aliyah, you're not going to get on the plane to come. You need to really think about it. I really think that the best thing to do is first is understand the cost of living and budgeting in Israel. We have some great resources online. We have some budgets that are going to be appearing in the chat in a moment. They're not for every size family, but we do have some couples, and I think it's a family of 6. You want to understand what we think is your cost of living for your first year. You want to speak to other people. The biggest item in most people's budget is going to be rent. Okay, this is going to help you understand what rental prices are. Not, oh wow, they're expensive. I do not like the word expensive because it's subjective, but it's going to give you a sense as you begin to look at what is compared to other parts of Modi'in, or compared to Jerusalem, to Rehovot, to Beersheba. It will give you a sense of what the size apartments are going around. The cost of living, and this is a really, really a beautiful thing for you. I guess, you know what, I'm going to jump off of my normal talking just to jump over to a different thing here. The budget is really, it's a really great resource because we want you to print it out. We want you to print it out and see what it looks like, because we want you to compare it to your cost of living that you currently have. And that's why there's 3 columns to it. One is in shekels and one is in dollars. And as you see right here, one is that we want you to compare what your currently expenses are to Israel. And that's going to be really important for you to have a sense of what your life is going to look like here in Israel. But it's more important than that. The reason that we really want you to look at it is that we think that once you understand the cost of living, that will help you figure out what your earning power is going to be if you're going to look for work, or if you're coming at the end when maybe you're living off of passive income. It will allow you to see whether it's not just, oh, I hear it's expensive in Israel. You're going to know is your cost of living, especially if you're bringing some income with you, is it going to allow you to live the lifestyle that you want? I'm not going to tell you what lifestyle you're going to live. Adina's not going to tell you. You're going to determine it. You're going to speak to other people, and that's going to help you get real hard numbers about what life is like in Israel. That's number 2 on the list here. You need to speak to people. You need to really be very direct. Israelis are famous for being very direct. How much does that cost? You know, how much is your car? How much rent do you pay? You need to start being more direct with people so you can have a sense of what life is really like here on a cost of living basis. And especially if you do have any income from abroad, or you're bringing your job with you, you definitely need to speak to an accountant. Happy to address later maybe some general questions, but you're going to want to speak to accountant to make sure that you're aware of the nuances and the special implications of being a U.S. or Canadian citizen living in Israel. The U.S. is very aggressive, one of the few countries in the world that taxes their citizens living abroad, and you need to be prepared for that. If you're looking for work in Israel, you need to start market research. You're making Aliyah in 3 years. Start the market research right now. Start thinking about what jobs are out there. Start understanding your skill set and what you need to prepare for the job market, and networking. I tell people that networking is like dating for non-marriage purposes. You don't want to propose to people on the first date. That gets awkward. But you want to take the pressure of that off and just start speaking to people. Oh, what's your dream job in Israel? Reach out on LinkedIn. Nefesh B'Nefesh can give you names of people, and start learning from people. What are your chances of getting hired? What skills do you need? What are salaries for your level of experience? It will give you a sense, an accurate sense of the lifestyle that you'll be able to live here. And I think, I'm sure, Adina, you'll head nod with this, I'm sure, is that most people, when they call up Nefesh, they don't ask us about the weather or the holidays here or the people. They really are in the nitty-gritty details of understanding about, is it possible for them to live here? And therefore, you want to start doing the research that's going to make this possible for you to make it from the unknown to known. If you're bringing children here, I think you must know that school registration usually starts around January time. So now is a great time, okay? Maybe, wait a couple of weeks to start reading about schools and speaking to parents. It doesn't mean you have to register in January, but registration opens up. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but you just need to start researching about it, find out it. It really comes down to, I'm not a big fan of Dr. Phil, but Dr. Phil has this great quote, is that you're only as happy as your most unhappy child. So if you're bringing children to Israel, you need to look into what each of your child's school options will be. And understanding the school system, and I'm sure that will come up later if you really have that. I listed school registration before community because you need to understand that if you're bringing children, most people will choose a community based on their children first and foremost. If your children are under the age of 5, then you can choose go to anywhere. There's wonderful daycare and kindergartens all over this country, but it gets much more intense and more ideological for choosing schools from first grade higher, and all the more so when you get to 7th grade and higher in this country. If you're looking for a community, you need to look at what factors you're looking for: size. Do you want to live in a mixed community? Mixed, do I mean religious and secular, English speaking and Israeli? You want to understand, you understand what you're looking for and the size and the components of it. Also, a tip is that people don't move to Jerusalem. Okay, they move to specific neighborhoods. They move to Be My Neighbor in Katamonim. Okay, they move to Baka, they move to Rechavia, they move to Givat Zev, they move to Remote Bet. You want to lean into those specific neighborhoods, and the same is true for Rehovot, Beit Shemesh, Renana, Zichron, all the places. It's the same as New York. I mean, I've discovered that there's actually within the 5 towns, there's things in LA. There's complexity to it, and you need to lean into that, and that will help you understand the nuances of also real estate prices for it. There's some great websites that you can find out the real estate prices. Most of them are in Hebrew because the competitive prices are in Hebrew. Madlan.co.il is one of my favorites. Yad Shtayim, Yad2.co.il, and there's also, I think, the best name of them, even though I don't think the website's so great, homeless.co.il, where websites where you can search rental and purchase prices as well. 2 final tips when we talk about the keys to planning. The government's going to give you 5 months of Ulpan. Joining an Ulpan is like joining a gym. There's no guarantee that you'll be a fluent Hebrew speaker at the end. You need to put the effort into it. Start now. It will make a difference on your integration, especially all you parents out there that are going to be those. I'm reflecting on myself as well. Those immigrant parents in the WhatsApp group that have to read it twice. Is that the word? I don't know. You're going to go to the parent-teacher conferences. Work on your Hebrew because it's going to make a super difference on helping the integration that happens. Again, happy to talk about individual questions about that later on, and as well as healthcare options. If you're approved for Aliyah, you'll be accepted to the Israeli healthcare system regardless of any pre-existing condition, which is really, really great. There are 4 HMOs in Israel. The basic plans, there really aren't so much nuances between them. Each plan has a supplemental plan. I call them the gold or silver plans. That's where some of the nuances do come about, as well as which part of the country that you're in. If you're in a big city like Tel Aviv, all 4 plans are there. If you are moving to Yerucham, all 4 plans are not in Yerucham. You need to be aware of which plan might be stronger to do that, and I'll be sharing some more information about that later. We will be sharing the slideshow as well, so if that question has come up as well, so you should not worry about that. Happy to share this as they do come in. Fantastic. Adina, anything to chime in so far? I know you're busy answering a lot of the questions that are coming through.
No, with just one thing, I see a bunch of people already asking about schools, and I know you'll speak about it a little bit, but to understand that the school system in Israel is very different than it is in the States. And so when people are asking for like lists of schools, we do have a database on our website that has some of the options, but part of it will depend on where you're living and what type of school you're looking for.
Okay. Well, I think maybe we we'll just jump in there in a second.
Okay.
I just want to push that a little further because I think it's a great natural opportunity. There are 3 types of schools in Israel. Okay. There are public schools, semi-private schools, and private schools. Okay. Public schools, there's 2 kinds. Okay. There's just regular or secular, and there's religious. Anyone in Israel who wants to send their kid to a religious public school can. Okay, it's just an option. So if you're living in a big city and you want a more a Jewish religious environment, you have to be aware that this is going to be a very general opportunity. Now, if you're living in a smaller town, or I should say a more homogeneous city or smaller town, then your religious public school is going to be very homogeneous, okay, and it won't have such a variety that's there. Now, the difference between a public school, whether it's a religious public school or a secular public school, and a semi-private school is often is the cost, and I'll show a slide on that. A semi-private school means they meet the Ministry of Education's demands, to, for example, to teach English and math, okay? But the parents are often paying for a longer day, usually for Jewish studies. So it's an option for people living in certain cities where they would like a more serious religious education to have the semi-private option. A private option, which is the third option, is much more expensive, and I'll show you in a second, but the school can do independently whatever they would like to do, and that is whether they want to teach music all the time or they want to study Torah all the time. Those options are there. Let me just switch for a second. We have a great article on our website right here just that shows some of the school expenses, but it will give you, once you have this vocabulary here, that they have the Mamlakti and Mamlakti Dati, which are the two public school religion, and they have their costs that are there. And you'll see that they do cost money. School in Israel is not free. It's just not a lot of money. Even if you're slipping into the semi-private schools, they sometimes can be $100 a month. Okay, which for many Israelis that sometimes can be more expensive. Once you go higher, and especially if you're going to go to a yeshiva high school where there's longer day, the expense is usually food, which can actually be lighten some of your food bills. As I have a 10th grader in my house, and then the Haredi sector really refers to some of the more private schools, but you have to see whether they are publicly funded as well, and it goes into some of the costs whether books are really not included. Sometimes there's lending programs. This is a great opportunity for me just to mention how we have a tremendous amount of resources on our website. If you should begin that search, that's there. Just to follow up on Adina's great point here is that it is very different than choosing a school in North America. Okay, and I encourage you, if you have a child that is especially on a higher grade, if you're going to look at someone who's on 5th or 6th or higher, you want to look at their gender and start looking at the schools to ask what options are there and investigate to see if this is the educational philosophy that you are looking for. And there is a lot of variety that's there, and it's important to speak to the school. And we have an article explaining the vocabulary, the yoetzet, okay, who's going to be an influential person in understanding what you're going to receive, Ulpan studies, what other English speakers are there. Or per city. If you have your mind made up in a certain city, then say, okay, what elementary school are options? And you could, whether you want to say you're looking for a Mamlakti Dati or a Mamlakti Dati Torani semi-private school, this will help you inform you as you're leaning in. But I've done this for a long time. Even these wonderful presentations that Adina and I are giving, it is still sometimes overwhelming. You're encouraged to reach out to us individually. I'll be sharing my email later on. But when you speak to people, it's going to start making sense. It's going to start, oh, what school? Oh, I sent my kid to a Mamlakti school. Oh, it's going to start clicking. And that's what, if you have the time between now and January, you're really going to get really informed about it. And I think that's what I really want to encourage you from this webinar, this Zoominar, is to take that step forward, because it's going to really give you more details. One question that came in is about special education, okay? There are tremendous resources of special education in this country, but there are many different levels of special education. So I definitely begin to read in our resource. It takes time to realize the accommodations you're going to receive, just as much as someone might get their accommodations when they move from state to state in the US. You want to bring your IEP, you want to go through the process and work with the school to make sure you're going to get the support, but also you're going to understand what the state is going to give to you based on your child's special education needs. If you're looking for a special environment or being mainstream, each school might have accommodations, they might not, but there are a lot of details, and we just had a whole webinar about this. So it's want to try and be inclusive as possible. We can happily speak about that for that.
Mark, I just want to add, just in terms of special ed, that when you spoke about beforehand about planning, then please keep in mind that when you want to get any type of help in school, from a learning disability to being in a separate class, it involves dealing with the municipalities and getting certain information. As Mark said, there's a separate webinar that we did about that, and we can give you resources, but please keep that in mind in terms of timing, that like you might want to come to Israel earlier in the summer versus later in the summer.
Great. And there are also people you can hire to be advocates as well. But first step is to get informed. A question came in here. I'm going to answer this live. Are there public English-speaking schools in Israel? The answer to that question is not really. Okay. The only English-speaking schools that I really know of are the diplomat school. Okay. So which I actually I have a neighbor who does send their children there, but it is not necessarily a Jewish environment. It is an, I think ecumenical is one of my favorite words. But there are a high school, there's a special high school program for integrating English speakers, but most North American parents are coming and they're looking for an environment to integrate their children into a school that's going to integrate them into the educational environment, which is a Hebrew speaking environment. You need to get informed about what that really means. We sometimes talk about the miracle of Hanukkah, which means you make Aliyah in July and August, and by Hanukkah, your kids are speaking fluently. It's not necessarily the first Hanukkah. It might be the second one. Okay. We do see remarkable adaptation by Hanukkah. Kids are clicking, but you want to understand that the school you're going to go is going to be an environment that's going to bring your children in. Okay. They're not going to be focused on grades. Okay. They're going to be just, a social integration, learning the language, understanding the concepts. It is so interesting for me as someone who grew up in the United States. I moved to Israel when I was 25, and I'm doing my math homework with my son, and I'm like, oh, it's not achad v'od achad shaveh shtayim. It's like, okay, sorry, I was like achad plus achad. It's like achad v'od achad. Oh, I have to learn how they teach the concepts, and the school you're going to choose is going to help you to do that. Fantastic. Well, I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions later on. I wanted to summarize the planning section, just focus on the facts. Your Aliyah viability is really calculated first and foremost. You want to get a green light. If you study the cost of living and you look at the earning power, it's going to help you figure out about how much your Aliyah plans can move forward. So I encourage you to look at it. You might find the perfect school for all of your children, okay? But if you don't have the confidence to find a job here, okay, I doubt that you're really going to come. I see it happen. As much as you might have the sense of the cost of living, we want to reduce the surprises, and that's what a big part of this webinar is. We want to raise these topics so that you can either speak to your personal Aliyah advisor, follow up in our Q&A next week, email us, have these conversations so that you can be as informed as possible and join the almost 4,000 North Americans making Aliyah each year. We're excited to see if that number is going to go up, considering that we're seeing a 200% increase in applications. That's interesting times we're going through. Let me walk you through the Aliyah process on a technical level. If you are interested in making Aliyah in the next 8 to 10 months, we encourage you to start the application. There is no commitment to do so. Why would you say, why not, if I want to make Aliyah in 5 years, why not start the application right now? I'll tell you why, is that things can change, okay? And I'll point out some things that don't change, but there might be new requirements. So it's best to hold off and focus on the planning if you're on a 5-year plan. I love the 5-year plan. I'm not trying to speak bad about it, but you just really want to hold off on the documents until it really is a window of opportunity within about 12 months beforehand. We encourage you to start the application. It is located on the Nefesh B'Nefesh website on the top right. It says apply. Once the first stage takes about a half an hour, maybe 25 minutes to start the application, submit all your details. The second stage is the deadly one. You have to submit copies of the documents that are required. I'm going to go over each of these in a moment. That is what's hard for many people. That's why we usually says it takes 6 to 8 months for a person to go through the Aliyah process. That's stress-free. That's without anxiety. We are seeing some people who are pushing through that process with about 3 months, and it can be stressful. Once you've had all of the documents, you've sent us copies, you're keeping the originals. Once you've showed us copies and submitted them, the Jewish agency will conduct an interview to determine your eligibility for Aliyah. They'll look at your Jewish lineage, they'll look at your birth certificate, they'll authenticate you are who you say you are. They'll understand how much time you spent in Israel, whether you have any Israeli backgrounds. And usually about 6 to 8 weeks later, maybe less, maybe more, they'll notify you that you've been approved for Aliyah, which is really great. Up to this point, you haven't committed to anything. Okay, then you have to decide whether you want to move forward. If you do not have an Israeli passport, you need to send away to get your Aliyah visa. That can take about 10 days, okay, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on how many people are trying to make Aliyah and whether the world is going through a pandemic. And then you can book your flight. And we have Aliyah flights out of pretty much all major cities. And depending on the time of year or the day of the week, we'll put you on one and you'll be able to fly to Israel with at least 2 pieces of luggage per person that's making Aliyah. That is the Aliyah stage of the process. A question that comes up: what happens if I get approved and I push my plans off? Okay, you're probably going to have to submit a few extra documents. Okay, but it's a good sign that you've been approved, that you'll be approved again. And if you've been approved and your approval is good for your year, okay, you can get it. You can reapply. It's a little big deal. It's a nice thing to do, but at least you've confirmed that you would get the benefits for making Aliyah, and that you could move forward. Just some of the keys to the processing. Again, we stress it. Reduce the anxiety. There's a lot of forms here. It can be really tedious, and therefore you want to just give yourself that stress-free environment. Where you were born can affect how long this is going to take. Who your parents are. Lishkata Kesher. If you were born in the former Soviet Union, it will take closer to 10 months, if not a little bit longer. Start earlier. Gather those documents, and you'll be happier that you started earlier. As well as the Israeli consulate. If how about one of your parents left Israel and they got married and they never told the Israeli consulate that they were married, Israel still thinks they're single. So when you come to say, hi, my parents Israeli, can I have a passport? You're going to have to get copies of the marriage certificate and get that authenticated, and you'll get a lot of forms. Just start earlier, and you'll thank us at the end. I mean, I hope that you'll thank us when you get here, but you'll definitely thank us that you started earlier. Okay, let's slide into some. Yep,
yeah, I just want to add one thing. That's something when people talk about. Well, I think you're going to speak about it in the next slide about the apostille, but that is something that there's no time limit on it. Meaning that even if you're in a 2-3 year plan, you can work on getting some of the documents now, which will make the processing time when you're ready shorter and easier.
Oh, my children's favorite word is apostille. They never knew about it until I started doing these webinars.
Neither did I.
Let's go. Okay, some of the documents you're going to need. You're going to need a valid passport. Okay, it's important to know that I think you need it at least about 6 months before you leave the country. So you just keep your eye on it, especially with the current delay on U.S. passports. I'm not sure if there's a delay for Canadian passports, but there's much to do about the over 2 million people that are waiting to renew passports, and there's a delay on that. You need to submit a valid passport. You'll need a copy of the birth certificate of every person making Aliyah, okay, with an apostille on it. What is an apostille? I will tell you. An apostille is an official authentication that is delivered by the state that you were born in, okay? So it's a higher level than a notary. So if you were born in California and you live in Ohio, okay, you're going to need to contact the state of California to get an apostille on your birth certificate. If you were born in Israel and live in Texas, you don't need an apostille on it because Israel knows what an Israeli birth certificate looks like. This is important because the authentication process of your identity and your legitimacy is based on the documents that you're going to submit. So you need one on every birth certificate for a person that is making Aliyah. As Adina said, this apostille on your birth certificate will never go bad. So there's nothing wrong with having it. If you're married, if you're widowed, or if you're divorced, or if you've been married and divorced and now you're married again, okay, you will need copies of all of those certificates with an apostille on that, okay? Now, getting an apostille, there are several ways to get it. One is you could walk into an office and get it, and it's not so expensive to get it. Unfortunately, some of those offices have slower hours because of COVID, but if you're planning for later, you can get it. You can sometimes do mail away by state to do it, or you can hire a company or service to do it, which is definitely more costly because they're doing all the runaround for it, but might save you time. Some of those do offer discounts to Nefesh B'Nefesh Olim, but you need to understand what an apostille is, okay, and how to get it. The easiest way to find out about it is to ask Rabbi Google or Dr. Google, whatever you want to call her, and just your state that you have, and it will give you the instructions to do it. The ads are going to come up first for the companies, but if you go down just 2 or 3 links, you'll see the state office. It will tell you where to do, how to contact, and they will give you that information about it. it. The last really important document that you're going to need is a letter proving your Jewish lineage or conversion documents. So if you are Jewish born to Jewish parents, the easiest way to do this is to get a letter from a rabbi in North America on official letterhead, signed by him or her, that states that they know you, that you're Jewish born to Jewish parents. They don't need to know that you're a nice person or you chanted the Torah really nicely at your bar or bat mitzvah, okay? They need to have a letter that states your Jewish lineage. If you converted, you're going to have your conversion documents, a letter from a rabbi about the coursework that you did, and a supplementary essay involved. You need to do this because this is the basis for your Aliyah, which is fast-track citizenship and your eligibility to do this. These are the essential documents that will enable you to have a Jewish agency interview. Adina.
Okay, a bunch of people are asking about New York apostilles. I'm not going to go into extreme detail right now about this. It's something that we could talk about more in the open forum next week. But just in general, New York, if anybody ever complains about bureaucracy in Israel, then anybody that was born in the 5 boroughs of New York has a 3-step process to get the apostille. Most people will have to get a new birth certificate, even if they have a valid one, because of the rules. So that's just something to keep in mind. People asked if you can do it by mail. You can definitely order the birth certificate by mail. You can also there's one county clerk that's open that you can get the letter. People asked about the letter of explanation. I can never say that word. But if things open up, then you can actually go down into the city and take care of all 3 steps together. So depending on how things are in New York, that will help you with that.
Okay, fantastic. We're asking once again, please put your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat. We got a few questions that came in there. If you have name changes, you're probably going to have to get a name change certificate about that, as well as an apostille on that. The apostille is how the Israeli person who doesn't speak English knows that this is an authenticated document and you have not forged it. It is key that your name will match up to your passport, your birth certificate, and your marriage certificate. So if you don't have a drastic change, obviously you got married, you may have taken on a name, but if your marriage certificate matches your birth certificate and the passport, you definitely want to do it. There is a way to get it in the UK. If you were born in other countries, I dealt with someone who's born in Zimbabwe, okay, or South Africa, then you're gonna have to look into how to get that from those countries. It is a process that we're having experiences, and definitely the Jewish Agency, who deals with Aliyah from around the world, can guide you on how to do this. But it is important. It does take time, and the apostilles never go bad. So if you just want to get ahead of it, this is a great homework. One other quick question, and I'll see if Adina has more to add before we move on to the other documents, is yes, when you make Aliyah, you're taking on Israeli citizenship, you can add it. Some people are triple citizens, okay? You're taking it on, you have to see whether you want to drop one, that's your choice. But by making Aliyah, you are taking on or activating your Israeli citizenship.
I just want to add one thing. Due to COVID and the situation, sometimes rules keep changing in terms of the process. And so it's really important to be in touch with your advisor. Like just as an example, if anybody's from the New York area and is supposed to get an Israeli passport, when Mark spoke about the different statuses. So they're only, I'm not going to go into details here, but they're only registering people of a certain age, and over a certain age, they have a different way to deal with them. So that's why it's really important to keep in touch. Just because you might know someone that did something a year ago, things have changed, so it's important to check in.
Okay, 2 questions came in. I just want to address them. We're going to move on to the next one. Is you can call your children whatever names they want, but the names on the passport has to match up to the birth certificate, okay? If you want to change their names when they get here, that's a different story, okay? If you want to Hebraicize their name and investigate that. But for the documentation process, it needs to. There are also a few questions that came in about the proof of Judaism. One is, how do I obtain this if I don't know a rabbi, okay? The whole system here is built off that the rabbi is going to identify your lineage. If you do not have a rabbi or a relationship, then you either might have a country that has your Judaism written onto your birth certificate, or you have to speak to the Jewish agency about finding other methods to prove your Jewish lineage. That is really a big part about this, is that they have to have some sort of documentation that you have that, and whether you're doing it. Additionally, if you are married to someone who's not Jewish, okay, then you could go through the process, and you have to see how your non-Jewish spouse is going to be given an accompanying visa to enter the country, and how you go to process eventually to getting a legalization to be inside the country. We're drifting into very, very specific question. We want to keep it as general as possible. I just want to answer one more question before I move to this. If you have converted, okay, and your conversion was completed more than 12 months ago, okay, then you are eligible for Aliyah. You have to live in a Jewish community for 12 months after Aliyah. It does not matter whether it is a Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox conversion, okay, but it's same thing about the letter from the rabbi. Each of them will likely be accepted by the ministry, depending on, again, the rabbi is affiliated with one of the major movements. But this is going to be important for you to investigate to see whether you can do it. There are rabbis that you might approach that might not feel comfortable writing that letter, and therefore you're going to have to find someone who's going to be able to give you that support and sign their name to it to add onto this list. I just want to wrap it up because we're actually almost at the end of a lot of information here. There are some additional forms that you do need to fill out. One is a waiver of confidentiality so that we can discuss your personal details with the government and the Jewish agency and ourselves. You need to you need to sign a form about how much you've entered and spent time in Israel. You don't have to, you have to do the best you can to fill that out, as well as you'll need to format a health declaration about your health situation, any surgeries or medications you're taking, and that's really, really important. Sometimes they will ask you for additional documentation, as it's important to say that at any of this during the interview, they can ask for additional documentation based on the information you submitted. There's a very important document that I want to emphasize here. That's why it's in red. You additionally have to give a criminal background check, proof that you do not have a criminal or FBI background check with an apostille on it, but you only need to submit that within 6 months of your Aliyah date. You do not need this for an interview. If you do get one now in August of 2020 and do want to come in August 2021, you're going to have to get another one. Okay, and that's something you have to be aware of. Okay, it's important that this is something that is that this can change. Okay, because you might get in August and then commit some sort of white collar crime and embezzle the Yankees of all their money. Okay, and therefore you're going to have a document that says you didn't do anything. It's important to realize that this does have a time limit on it, and this is another example where a year ago this was not a requirement. So if you are making Aliyah in a year or a couple of years, we are not sure that the specific specifications of what is going to be required to this point.
I just want to add about the background check that any place that you've lived over the age of 14, you need a background check from. So for instance, if people here mentioned England, if they left England after 14, like if they were 15 or 18 or 20, then they need a background check from England and also the FBI background check.
Thank you, Adina. Amazing. Okay. The benefits to making Aliyah. This is a frequently asked questions. I actually call them the coupons to making Aliyah. Just because someone gives you a benefit doesn't mean you have to use them. But sometimes it's good to know what you're going to get. If you're approved for Aliyah, the government's going to fly you to Israel and give you a free taxi to your first destination in the country. Obviously, we're dealing with a quarantine coming afterwards right now, but hopefully this is something that will soon pass in our days. They will welcome you to the basic Israeli healthcare system if you're not working for your first year. The moment you do start working, and then you'll pay the tax that's based on the income that you're having. But this is really nice to know that you'll be accepted, and whether you can want to sign up for supplementary care or you want to investigate private insurance, that's something that you need to do on your own. I mentioned this before, the government's going to give you 5 months of intensive ulpan, 5 days a week, for 5 hours. You don't have to start it right away. You have a year and a half to use this. There are some tax breaks. The government will give you an option to get a discount on your Arnona. are known as both a neighborhood in Jerusalem, I'm looking at it right now from my window, as well as the municipal tax. In Israel, whoever's in the apartment pays the municipal tax, and you can get a handsome 70 to 90% discount on a high percentage of your apartment, as well as they will give you a 10-year tax holiday on passive income earned abroad. You have to understand that, which really means that any passive income you have, capital gains, think capital gains, think you're renting your apartment out in Colorado. Anyone from Colorado on the call here today? That is considered passive income. You're going to want to speak to an accountant about really understanding what that means, but you'll be able to not have to file that to Israel. And then the 11th year, you're going to have to disclose it, and you're going to have to pay any tax differences between the capital gains of what the U.S. will charge and Israeli tax authorities. The customs tax, many people have heard about the ability to bring a lift or a shipment to Israel. You will pay the shipping cost, okay? I'm going to emphasize that. The government's going to waive the tax, okay, on it 3 times within 3 years. How much is the shipment is going to cost? It depends how much you're going to bring, okay? So you just have to think about that. A shipper will give you an estimate about what that's going to be. And that is really the ins and outs of the customs. There are over 40 shippers, so you have to ask your friends or strangers on social media for recommendations. There is a purchase tax discount on purchasing an apartment in Israel, as well as a very small amount of money to help with your mortgage rate. Mortgage rates are so low right now that I don't think that small amount of money on the mortgage rate is such a big deal. There is a tax discount on a new car, either purchasing one or bringing one into Israel, as well as the government's going to give you, sometimes it's about $4,000 per person who makes Aliyah in your first 5 months, 5.5 months to help you get settled, as well as a little amount of money to help in your rent subsidy in your 8th, or I think it's 9th month now, to help you depending on the size of your family. Those are the benefits to making Aliyah, not to mention the weather, the people, the holidays, all those wonderful things that makes living in Israel great. As we're almost at the conclusion, and we're going to deal with a few minutes of questions and answers, as we have about maybe 15 minutes left, I just want to mention some of my tips. There's a great Facebook group called Living Financially Smarter in Israel. It's a fantastic English-speaking group where even I, who's living in Israel for 19 years, am learning some great tips about how to be smarter about my finances in Israel. Please be direct. We talk about money openly in Israel. You need to learn to be very direct. If you're worried about a school, find someone in that school. If you're worried about a job, find someone. Speak to people. Ask for help. If you are looking for a job in Israel and someone offers you money and they say, oh, we'd love to hire you for 17,000 shekels a month, you should Google the Hilan tax calculator, and that will begin in Hebrew to explain to you how much tax you're going to pay and the social benefits that come with it. If you have healthcare questions, I love the Shira Pransky Project. It is a great organization. Some people like to hire them for personal advocates. They're doing great work translating articles about supplemental health coverage, medicines that are available. It is a great resource to get informed about what it means to be a healthy person in Israel, or like myself, a hypochondriac as well. Come informed, and you'll have great care and great understanding. If you're looking to work, please network with our employment team. They really have really great contacts and great experience with a plethora of different professions. Please do not be shy. Know your rights and what to negotiate. It's really important. There are really amazing ways to save money in your paycheck. Be aware of it. Second incomes barely pay income tax. You have to be aware of all these things, and that's why consulting with Nefesh B'Nefesh, speaking to employment advisors, speaking to other people in your field will help you become more informed and learn by the thousands of people who have made Aliyah before you. And my last tip is a reminder about school registration. Okay, you want to be warned. Don't be surprised that suddenly things are going to get really solidified in May, and you're like, oh my goodness, I need school for my children. Be aware that sometimes some schools are in demand, and you want to find out what you need to do to be able to take advantage of that. Okay, before we switch over to questions, anything else to add, Adina?
Sorry, I'm on mute. No, one other thing, just because we mentioned a few times about registering for school. Yes, Israelis start registering in January. If you don't have an Israeli passport, you will not be able to officially register until you actually make Aliyah. Don't worry. If you are moving to cities that have, there are a bunch of cities that have municipal coordinators that work in the municipality that are liaisons for English speaking Olim. You should definitely be in touch with them, and they will guide you in how they arrange for you to be registered for school.
Okay, thank you. Great. Oh, I guess we're in the Q&A portion of this as we wind down. A great question. I'm going to answer this live. A 6-month background check is from your date of your arrival in Israel, your date of Aliyah. Okay, you do not need it for your interview, but once you realize that you're really going to come, then it's 6 months. You want to get it. Worst comes to worst, you'll get it again. But it's important to just have that there. A question came in about the conversion certificate. If the person's rabbi is no longer with us, I would contact the synagogue, contact the greater movement behind it so that you can get that type of letter. There's a difference between the rabbi's letter about why you converted and the letter who says that you're a member of the community that where you currently are living. So you just have to be aware of that. Another question came in about disability money. You have to be aware if you're getting Social Security, there are 2 kinds of disability. Some of them stop when you leave the United States, and some of them do continue overseas. So you have to be aware of that. I'm going to answer one more question and see if Dina wants to add. And I'm going to take 2 real quick. One is issues of retirement income, passive income. There are general rules. It is worth. We have a great webinar next Sunday, I believe, or as soon. We had one last week. I get so confused with about passive income and retirees. Watch that webinar and then reach out to an accountant. It's worth the consultation to understand that you're aware about what your financial plan is going to be for within the 10-year tax holiday and longer. There's a question here about exotic pets, pythons and chinchillas. Unfortunately, much to my chagrin, the most popular article on Nefesh B'Nefesh's website is Pets and Aliyah. I think, and I think Adina will agree with me, there are much more important articles about people's benefits and financial planning, but nonetheless, despite my best efforts, Pets and Aliyah is the #1 viewed article on our website. Definitely check that article out to see, and you can always email our pet specialist at Pets at Aliyah to see about what is pythons. I was on an Aliyah plane where there were snakes under the plane. I will admit to that. I was once on an Aliyah plane where there were snakes under the plane. Okay.
The email for pets is pets@nbn.org.il. I'll put it in the chat for people.
A question came about items can be bring to Israel valuables, coins, stamp, comic book collections. It's a great, it gets very technical about the value of these items. Are you shipping them? The shipper will you can take insurance out on it. But if it's super, super valuable, you have to be aware that it is, something insurance. You do not pay VAT on it because you're importing it. I mentioned something about second incomes not taxed in Israel. Second incomes are taxed significantly less. So I work full-time for Nefesh B'Nefesh. My wife works for another not-for-profit. She works 3/4 time. The higher income is taxed at a higher bracket, and the second income pays less. The more children you have, you get tax discounts. I want to use this as a motivation for you to get more informed so you can concretize what your take-home is going to be so you have the comfort with your standard of living. Okay. Will an accountant school us on the cheapest way to withdraw money from an American account? Okay, that's a good question. I think Living Financially Smarter, the Facebook group, will help you. The accountant can speak to you. There are lots of great companies that give competitive ways for you to bring money to Israel. The banks are not competitive at all, but you want to speak to other people about how to do it. The frequency is really, really important. A comment came in about the Nefesh B'Nefesh Go North and Go South programs. We have extra assistance to help people to move to the northern communities of Israel and the south. Extra focus because there are fewer North Americans moving there. So we have a concentrated resource to help you do that. Lean in for a personal consultation if you have the ingredients that you might be able to do that. And that's a word about that. A great question. Thank you, Debbie, for saying this. Social Security payments are not taxed in Israel. There's a great treaty between Uncle Sam and Uncle Moshe. Social Security are not taxed. So you really want to be able to do this. A question came in, is there a way to be set up with an Aliyah coach specifically related to finances and taxes, yes, I would send you to the Facebook group, Living Financially Smart in Israel. The founder there, Rivka Leibowitz, it does this as a profession. There are other people who do this. An accountant might be able to take you through it in your personal circumstances. Nefesh B'Nefesh cannot guide you on your personal finances because we are not-for-profit. We're independent. We're nonpartisan. I can't tell you to vote for you. I can't give you an accountant. I can just give you assistance on what are the general rules, and you'll be able to get more information about that. We're winding down, and we're getting rapid questions coming in. One, what ulpans do your children, for children, do you recommend in the U.S. before making Aliyah? You have to try what's good for you. I tell people that Rosetta Stone is a great paperweight. I can't tell you whether it's going to help you. Someone mentioned Duolingo in the chat. You have to just try it out. Expose them to Hebrew. Listen to radio. Check out websites. Read books. You have to exercise. You know, you have to really give some effort to learn Hebrew. And is the apostle just a raised seal? No, it's an extra piece of paper. Okay, it is an extra piece of paper that says the words apostille on it.
If you want to see what a good advice that a bunch of Olim have told me is that if you go to Google and write New Jersey apostille and just click on images, you'll be able to see what an apostille looks like.
Oh,
they have lots of pictures of it.
They have lots of pictures right here.
There you go. Any of them.
Okay. It says at the top there, apostille. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Let's move to the final slide so you can contact us. The other questions that came in. A question Lauren asked: who do we speak to figure out the net take home? Look at our online budgets, and again, you use the Hilan tax calculator, so you'll be able to look at that. A question came in about, can savings be kept in bank outside of Israel? Yes, you can keep your American bank account, but if it's passive income, then you're paying that tax to the U.S., and then you have to be aware for what's going to happen after the 11th year as well. Very good. If you make Aliyah from the U.S. and your income is solely from Israel, this is the question I thought we'd get earlier. If you keep your American citizenship, do you have to pay U.S. taxes? Yes, American citizens are taxed wherever they are around the world. But by virtue of you sitting in Israel and doing the work, you're going to open yourself up to Israeli taxation. So you have to really speak to an accountant to understand how that's going to impact your bottom line. A question, any specific resources regarding purchasing an existing apartment versus built a project? It's a topic for another time. Everything in life has advantages and disadvantages. You have to really see what's the effort that you need to put into it. Many people who buy on paper say it's less expensive, but it's a bigger headache. It's sight unseen. You don't know who your neighbors are going to be. A question came in. My father was born in Israel, and I had an Israeli passport as long as a child. At some point, my father cancels his citizenship along with mine. And can I just request my citizenship back? You have to call the Jewish agency. You need to speak to them about your specific situation. It can get complicated about that. Okay. Great. Let's see. Let me check the chat. See if anything else came in there. As we're in the final moments of this great webinar here. Freelancers do pay taxes. That's a good question that came in there. Yes, you do. We have some great articles and webinars on freelancers, on how to do it and how to set it up. You can't avoid tax. You can't avoid tax. Nothing you could do about it. Here's a question. A 13-year-old cannot make Aliyah by themselves. You have to be really 18. 17 is a gray area. Adina, anything else you think we're missing as we slide here? I feel like we're ending with a little bit of a whimper.
I'm just looking quickly also through the chats to see if there's any other questions.
Oh, some people are saying thank you. Oh, it's amazing. My email address is the same as the one on the screen, just Mark instead of Aliyah. So you just have to be aware about that. We are here for you. We really want to emphasize that We want you to have these webinars to give you the general information that you could that do some more research and ask us more specific questions. Dr. Google is a great resource, but you want to confirm it with the experts. Ask us. 10 more webinars. Each person who attended today, the 100 and I think it was 130 people who logged in, will get an invitation to the next Tuesday's specific Q&A session. There's a lot to learn about this, especially if you're making Aliyah next year. There's going to be a lot more webinars and Zooms about this and personal consultations. But you've done a great job in taking a step forward, and that will be hopefully allow you to concretize your plans for making Aliyah. We will include this slideshow in with the recording. Worry not. So this will be something that you'll be able to view later on. I want to thank behind the scenes my colleague Josh Sussman, did a great job sharing all those links, and of course Adina Bennett, fantastic job on the questions, and I thank you very much for being so complimentary to all of the information that we gave today. On behalf of Nefesh B'Nefesh, we wish you a great Aliyah. Aliyah is a process. It doesn't end even when you arrive in Israel. It's ongoing. So keep on moving forward, keep the process going. You should always be Ba'aliyah, and we look forward to helping you through this process. Have a great week and a great rest of the summer, what remains of it. Wishing you all well.